All right, everybody, welcome. Let me turn my camera on. It's always an ordeal over here, but it's fun. I kind of like it. How do I? There we go. I'm back. Good to see everybody. Welcome to the Waiting Room Virtual Release Day 4. We're excited. We have great speakers today. As always, I hope you are all healthy, happy, and warm. If you would like to join any future events, send me an email, text it, Instagram, Twitter, all of those. You can connect with us on all of our social medias on your screen now. Nervous Ghost Press on Instagram, Twitter, Nervous Ghost, Facebook, Nervous Ghost Live on YouTube, and of course, www.nervousghostpress.org. And my email address, ghosts@nervousghostpress.org. I'm excited to begin and be able to share a little bit about the organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit arts advocacy organization, and my dream and my hope and my goal is to make art accessible to all who need it most, and to live by the motto that our voices carry strength. And I truly believe that they do. I believe that everything that we have in our hearts has a purpose. Our art has a purpose. You can read the art in the newest journal that we have, The Waiting Room. It is fantastic. The cover is great. Shout out to Ghost Dennis. One of these days I'm going to get him to appear. But before that, I have to learn how to have his face up here with me. So that'll be a cool homework assignment for myself. Our community arts workspace is live, and if you need a space to work, email me also and say, hey, I'm working on a novel, I'm working on a poetry collection, I'm working on some music, I'm working on painting, anything that you're working on, just let me know. And we have 2 computer stations. We have certain programs in there if you need it, and it's free. There's air conditioning, so especially when the weather is warm, you can get out of it. We have a refrigerator, so you can bring food, but nothing super stinky, I think. But food, we have a little oven that you can use. It's really fantastic. I've only used it once, kind of trying to test out what to put in there, but I'm excited about it. And that space is for people to have access to a workspace. Having a workspace is so important, and I've certainly learned how much it matters. And I hope so many people have access to a workspace, whether it's a corner someplace, a bona fide office, or something where you can sit and just be with your art. But we have that available. If you want to learn more, always email me, visit the website. Let me see here. We'll have a Q&A discussion. I really like our Q&A discussions. Our Q&As are very informative, I think. I think they're very beneficial. It's a great way to meet the artist. It's a great way to meet everybody and really see who they are on the inside. So send us your questions, email them. I'll check my accounts here or there. But the easiest way is to put a comment in the YouTube comments section. And so enough about me, and you don't want to keep seeing me talk. And so our first speaker today is Alan Byrne.
Good evening, everybody. First off, I'd like to thank Matthew and Nervous Ghost Press for their great publications and for supporting my work, supporting our work, all the readers tonight. So thank you, Matthew. I had 2 pieces accepted to the waiting room, a fabulous concept. And I must add, I've spent way too much time in waiting rooms over the years, especially too much time in hospital waiting rooms. So let's put that aside, and I'm going to read my first piece, not about hospital waiting rooms. It's a poem called My Waiting. My waiting reminds, my waiting postures, my waiting backed up, my waiting, oh yeah, my waiting Fagu, my waiting Halva, my waiting Marvel, my waiting Cosplay, my waiting Donald, my waiting Fungus, my waiting Off Key, my waiting Dante, my waiting Unlearn, my waiting, my waiting seating, my waiting did wit, my waiting wrong done, my waiting doing, my waiting washed up, my waiting my toe, my waiting bee buzz, my waiting injured. So my second piece was called Tiny Mussolini, and it was a photo, one of my photos, and my words. And Lord help us, Tiny Mussolini became part of a longer sequence, which I'm going to share my screen now and read you my sequence of my photos and my words as photo poems. Okay, don't give me a hard time here. Where did you go? Let's try it again. Let's see. There we are. Awaiting is the name of the sequence. And off we go. Balconcino Bellino, awaiting Tiny Mussolini. A first disobedience in wait. Waiting. Disputy, silent storm. Feeding on the dry. Dream of a full neighborhood of shit flooding up. Walking on it. You can't avoid it. This wet mess over door sills. It can't be voided. It's under everything, sometimes flooding up. It carries the shit with it. Snake, snake, and snake, hoping for a funnel down. The neighbors gathered, come in to help with cleanup. I offer coffee and they smile, declining and want to head downstairs. There it's flooding most everywhere, still coming up, and then we're walking in it, like now. Leaning, balancing. Mention, hopes. Oh, shark dentalism in rock danger. Redwood step aside. So I'm back here with my face again, and I want to talk for 1 minute, a little tiny prop for my new book coming out called In the Pace of the Path, which is a hybrid of my prose and poetry and photos from Uncollected Press, and it will be coming out in November. And from that book, I have a very short poem that I'd like to end with. Breath held, waiting for the last lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Let me bring myself here. Whoops. There we go. One of these days, I'm going to figure out how to push one button and everything does what it's supposed to do. That would be amazing. So thank you, Alan. And Alan we've been chatting for a while, and it's proof when we spoke before the event went live, and Alan and I were talking about a lot of different things, work and life and work and all the in-betweens. And it just shows how people we've never met in person before, we've met through Zoom a few times. One of these days, I want to have a Nervous Ghost Press party with everybody in person someplace. I think that would be amazing. But it shows how art brings people together and brings us together, and we can connect on certain aspects of life that our art has illustrated for us. And so I think often a lot about when Alan shows the images, I think about nature, and I think about how I try to more these days just look. I don't even smell the roses. I just want to see the roses. and just go outside and see what the trees are doing and what the grass does, if there's grass, if the concrete is cracked and why is it cracked, and what kind of life does it have, or what kind of life does it not have, and then bring that into some type of art and some type of creative endeavor. And so thank you, Alan. Always great to have you. Always great to see you. Our next speaker is returning from I think our first event, and the long-awaited stories. I can't wait to listen to him again, and I hope you all are ready. MD Berkman.
Thank you. I think I was at your second event, and I read my poems, Smuggler and White Room. Tonight, I'm going to read from the beginning of the short story in the waiting room called Hidden Lake. The weather was beautiful for my birthday, so my husband and I decided to drive to a state park and hike to a spot called Hidden Lake. We had been to this lake before, we thought, because one of us, probably me, had marked it with an X on an old map we had from the time when the state park was part of the Appalachian Trail. And maps could be found stacked inside a wooden box at the trailhead year-round. Nowadays, trail maps are glossy, but this older map was not. And it had yellowed and cracked in the most inconvenient places. In fact, if it were not for having been kept in a sealed plastic bag, it probably would have disintegrated into paper crumbs. Still, we could make out the solid line that represented the former AT, or White Trail, and the broken line that showed the access, or Blue Trail, off which the lake lay. But what if the white blazes are gone and we can't find our way to the Blue Trail? My husband asked when we were halfway up the highway to the state park. We had been enjoying the fiery fall foliage seen from the car, and this really put a damper on the mood. I should have been used to my husband's timidity, or caution as he calls it, when it came to wilderness areas. But he normally waited until we were deep in the woods to express misgivings, usually about our ability to get to our destination and back to the parking area before nightfall, no matter how early in the day we had set out. The blazes can't have totally faded, I responded. And even if they have, it's a state park. Other people must continue to use the trails, whatever they're called now. And you'll see. Once we're on the trail, we'll remember how to go. I'm sure of it. The lake must have made quite an impression on us. Otherwise, why would we have marked it with an X as for buried treasure? My husband smiled at this. You're probably right, but I'm still going to have to rely on you to be the scout. You're the one with the good memory. It's true, I said at the time. It's what I keep telling myself now. These glitches I've been experiencing aren't a sign of anything but reorientation. It occurs whenever one settles in a new place. Your brain cells have to concentrate on the here and now for a while, and it's no wonder some of the older paths get a little obscured and require some bushwhacking to re-enter. For example, I'm having some trouble remembering my husband's name. I want to say Robin, but I wonder if that is really his name or just the name I would associate with a man who walked beside me in a forest. Not that I am any Maid Marian. Or am I? I was sure that was my name, just not the maid part. But even though it sounds right, feels right, my husband's name can't be Robin. Robert, perhaps. Or Rob. Robbie has a familiar ring to it. I'll call him that until some other name comes to mind. Right now, I want to get back to remembering the trip to Hidden Lake. I need to retrace my steps of that day. I don't know why, but I must, as surely as the lake were a magnet and my brain a lump of iron ore. And why not? It was a day full of colors, reds, oranges, yellows, greens, not to mention blue. It was blue, wasn't it, the lake? Such a contrast to the gauzy whiteness all around here. But you always said you liked an all-white room, I hear a voice say. The voice is familiar, and yet not so much. But anyway, it's a distraction from the task at hand. Indoors, I declare, even though I feel this interruption doesn't warrant a spoken answer. Outdoors, I love the vibrancy of nature. I intend to give myself that pleasure. Ah, pleasure, the voice says. Wish I could tell who is speaking. But as noted, the whiteness is very gauzy. So back to Hidden Lake. Robbie, my husband, and I had been to that state park often, if only once before to the lake, and we had our routine. We would leave the car in the lot for the picnic area by the pond, not to be confused with the lake. The pond was man-made, an old iron ore mining pit filled with water. Visit the restrooms, rusty but acceptable with hot water, in the stone building up the path, and then go have cheese sandwiches and tea at our favorite table perched on a rocky slab above the pond. Sunny or cloudy, the air was invariably chill, and we would huddle together as we ate and pointed out colorful trees to each other. Quite romantic. In fact, the state park was where we went to set the date after we got engaged. Yes, that's it. That was when we found Hidden Lake the first time. It's funny I should remember that so clearly now, when neither Robbie nor I remembered it the day of our last trip there. But then all I have now is memories to unwind and rewind. It's funny, too, when I think of it now, that Robin and I never dressed alike except for those trips to the woods, when we wore matching red down vests and the same brand of hiking boots. We even had matching binoculars slung around our necks in case we heard birds in the trees. Perhaps that was the reason for dressing alike, to allow the birds or other woodland creatures to identify us as a bonded pair of red-breasted, whatever the term is in chickadee or chipmunk for humans, or even for creatures living long enough to see us many times in their territory, to be recognized as Marion and Robin. I mean Robbie. The day we set out to revisit Hidden Lake was a bit colder than usual for the middle of October, and my husband wore a red plaid wool shirt under his red vest, and I a blue jeans jacket, so we weren't dressed totally alike. And that might have been a problem, though at the present, I can't remember why. I only know that thinking about it makes me not cry exactly, but get that hollow feeling that can accompany crying. I'm sure I'll figure it out later. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll have
Thank
to
you.
read the rest in the waiting room.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody read the rest. I was, while you were speaking, I was thinking about how I'm so fortunate to be able to read the work, discuss it with everybody, and then hear them read the work, hear you read the work in your voice. And I was following along in my copy and remembering how I was kind of giving life to these characters. And it's such a fantastic I don't know, I just feel super grateful that I'm able to do that. And I was remembering, or I was thinking about memories and my kind of philosophy on memories and how sometimes memories make us happy, sometimes memories make us sad, and sometimes memories are just kind of they're just this really cool thing in our brains that I can't quite figure out yet. But writing and art is such a powerful tool to be able to work through them. And so everybody, please read the rest of it. Get your copy at www.nervousghostpress.org. One more time, I'm going to throw it up on the screen. Get a copy from all of the speakers that we've had, that you've listened to. Their work is fantastic. I am biased, but it is still very, 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 very awesome. Thank you, MD Berkman. Up next, we have Amanda Kors, who was the recipient of the 2021 Nervous Ghost Press Book Prize for Poetry for the poetry collection It's Just a Little Blood. I think it's a fantastic collection, but again, of course, I'm the biased one here. And Amanda has been here since day one, which is fantastic. And so, Amanda, it's all you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, for hosting these, for continuing Nervous Ghost Press, for continuing to publish me, and for part of being, you weren't the ultimate, like the final judge, but for being, part of the process, for founding Nervous Ghost, and, because you do what you do, I have my first book. For today, I'm going to read 3 poems. I'm going to read 2 from the journal, from the waiting room, and 1 from the book, It's Just a Little Blood. So, I can turn to it. Uh-oh, I turned to the wrong one. Okay. Oh, that's why. Too many bookmarks. Goodness. Ed, Mia, and Anna. I look in the mirror and am mortified. I step on the scale, humiliated by a body intensified by medications and misguided attempts at so-called self-care. Just treat yourself, and whatever other justifications I have for food that day. Now I leave my shirt on during sex. Now I wear a one-piece swimsuit with rouging, hiding until I am satisfied with the disappearing of my body. Flirting with the edge of another disorder, petting a scorpion. Will I prick my finger on its tail? Is today the day? As long as I don't faint on my bicycle, that would be the diagnosing point. A threshold I won't cross, but will visit, shake hands, and leave. As long as I don't get addicted to the ritual, I'll get what I want without any of the disease, right? A redacted memory. You hear of many types, from parents, the boyfriend, the uncle, the stranger, but sibling, a rare coal, but its embers are just as branding. Unknowing, mom sends you as my lifeguard for the backyard pool. The chlorine singes my nose hairs. In any other house, that would be a safety measure. I didn't get to breathe. But in ours, it is a sprint down a railing-less staircase. Your pleasure begins. It's a tolerable edge until you decide to enter the water. A shark, a leopard, a hawk. I've never been a good swimmer, despite the pool access, despite the lessons. You come closer. I see you smirk and I know I've already lost. Your hands, a python around my shoulders, threatening my neck. And then I'm kicking you, trying to be the one who leaves bruises this time. The water resistance overpowers my 9-year-old body. You let me up, 1 Mississippi, to Mississippi, dunked again, but not before I see Satan's euphoria on your face. This continues. I've lost track of how many times you've held me under. I've made the mistake of staying conscious because that means you can keep going. Keep playing with my weakening body. Your favorite water park is one of my lungs. My thoughts are fraying linen. My chest burns like a forest fire. Tears don't count if you cry underwater. At last you're in your afterglow. I'm released. I scramble like a newborn gazelle in a stampede out of the pool, a drowned mouse. And you float, eyes in a satiated glaze, giggling. And from It's Just a Little Blood, patient period. The slow motion ooze. The intent to stain every fabric within a 3-foot radius. Get up, to the bathroom, sit. Ah, fuck. Get up, waddle to the cabinet, bend over. I recall the psych ward, sitting, feeling unused lining falling out. Wipe, stand, pull the hospital gown that can't tie shut. Always a flash risk. I haven't earned my clothes back, I'm told by a different unconfident nurse each day. Down the hall, nurse's station. I need tampons. Typing, 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 typing. Oh, typing, 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 typing. All the authority of a 3rd-grade teacher who wants to correct your grammar to say, may I go, instead of can I go, to the restroom, even though for the function of language we all understood what was meant. But semantics are fun to inflict on 9-year-olds. So, may I have some tampons, please? I am a thread away to the secret words that would lead to the threat of being taken to the other side of the psych ward, where the Stanford prison experiment is more explicit. Oh, of course, honey. Here you go. Just ask if you need anything else. Typing, 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 typing. She hands me a box. Typing, 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 typing. Honey sounds like derogatory sweetener, hate that lingers between her unflossed teeth, the rotting bacteria she breathes on every patient. We're the sick kind of sick. I know I'm given a box instead of begging for one at a time because my skin says potentially my father could sue over abuse. The important part is not the suing, it's that he could win. Humiliation is protocol, however. Waddle back to the toilet. My hands are shaking. I always lock the door behind me, even when no one is home, to keep out the boiling shadow, silent as morphine and just as numbing. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Oops. I did it in the wrong order. Now your name is covering my face. There we go. Thank you, Amanda. And so everybody go out and get a copy of It's Just a Little Blood. And the really cool thing, I'm not going to talk about it because you have to go get it and figure it out yourself. But it is educational. I think it's groundbreaking in my personal opinion. And it sheds light on a topic that needs to be discussed that isn't discussed enough. And the coolest thing is that with these virtual events, with the virtual atmosphere and environment in general, is that it allows us to speak with people like MD Bergman, Alan Byrne, Amanda, Andy, and everybody from different parts of the country, parts of the world. And then we can share our art. We can share our books that we have. We can share our paintings and songs and everything else. And so I'm so happy and and fortunate to be able to see everybody and to listen to Amanda's work over and over and over again, because I just showed somebody a couple the other day, Amanda, and I was like, check this out. They're like, oh my gosh. But we'll see how it all goes, right? And so thank you, Amanda. And so everybody, after our next speaker, be sure to send us any questions if you have any. I always have a couple questions, or speakers, if you have any for each other. I'd rather have you discuss among yourselves instead of me. I don't want to hear myself talk the whole time. And so our next speaker is Andy Orem.
I thought it would be nice to wrap up the readings tonight with some summer-themed poems, which are light and pleasant. They'll help us come back to the surface after the heavy stuff that the other great speakers have offered us. So I'm going to start with one in place of the book review section. And this starts with a rather wild quote from Victor Hugo. The indefinable weight of immaterial euphorias. Afternoon, the time to take a horizontal perspective and to attempt the book review section, but instead to drift inevitably out to sea, whose waves lap against one's thought, just as they will embrace the shore long after we depart. To give oneself over to wonder on glimpses still floating on the surface of one's memory. Of the clay that buttresses the cliffs, will it survive storms from another year? Of what bird left the tracks too large for the plucky sandpipers seen today? Of the toddlers reaping knowledge from the sand, a new turn in the cycle. Might they come to venerate the strand where the dry earth converses with the uncompromising deep? Wandering then to a gallery of impressionist floating boats and wire-wrought fish to worship and wonder some more. Contentment speaks from the aphorisms scratched on souvenir stones. If even I am stirred, surely some will bring those cursive sympathies to check out, a banner for their home and another season for the consignment store. And thought continued to swirl and drizzle like specks of foam upon the switchgrass. We remember that the best fish for grilling shines from its icy wooden plank early in the day. The crisp vegetables must be fried but briefly. Good eating leaves one ready for card games and the puzzle page, and at a suitable distance from world's tumult, as to step finally into the book review section. So if that puts you in a proper mood for something light, this is another poem which is a little more emotional. Let me share screen again. This is called Obod, or the Silent Oboe. Today, no one woke to the sound of an oboe, scaling the trees in search of the residence's open windows. The shouts have likewise vanished from the playing fields, from the pastel blue pool cavity, still host to an inch of water and soggy leaves, from the bare wooden bunks waiting to be swept out. Perhaps a custodian, if she pauses, will hear an echo of quadriceps groans and twilight scratches, vows of friendship, malicious whispers, and choruses repeated shakily around a pine wood fire, thus guaranteed life for one more generation. A wheezing soccer ball lies forgotten on the green. The breezes toss about a large white feather, awarded for some stupendous backhand swat, or the role of Tevye played under the stars. Icons of paper mache grace the corners of the crafts complex. Where is everyone? They have all returned to previously assigned life crises, treading their rounds like the mayor now taking the familiar path between the barns in the property next door. But some mornings they wake up to the memory of an oboe's melody snaking through their dreams. Maybe we can handle one more. If I go the short one, I will share this one too. This is a short poem in 2 parts. In a pool, 1. Pillars and lanes accordioning across long heated air breath, oceanic, gray, blue, surface wall by wall. The movement endures till the next sweep. Where is sound? Just we flit oceanic. Time sweeps in with the hour stroke, suspended into hulk, bone hewn, reconscioused. Now the steam room. 2. Free path from pebbles through delirious plunge, open strokes snapped by ripples, splash claps all the way to the pines. Goldfish streak past ghosting raptor in brisk sky. Dragon afternoon across eternity. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And your poems inspired the first question for the Q&A. So let me set that up here. And for everybody watching, I need to remove myself. Let me see. There we go. Here we go. Coming back. So everybody's face are gonna pop up now. So if you're doing something weird, stop it. There we go. Perfect. All right, we're all back. So Andy, that question that I have, and of course, it's for anybody, but your work inspired me in talking about themes and so on. And the question that I have for everyone is when you're thinking about a theme for a set of poems or a story or whatever it may be, do you sit down and say, I'm going to write about this? Or do you sit down and just go, I'm going to write, we'll see what happens. And after a while, you realize all these themes start to reveal themselves.
Well, since you started with me, I'll answer. My poems always have a point. And some poems I read, some of these modern poems, they're playing with language, or symbolist. And I want to say something in the poem, even though it might not be direct. But sometimes I start out with one idea and I end up with something totally different. So it's very random. It is, I take my subconscious where it leads me.
Well, my poetry and my prose are the same. They tell a story. And it just comes into mind, and the words tell the story as they're coming out of me. I'm also very visual. So I often write what I see in my mind. And if I have to edit, I have to see it again.
I'll add that my poems tend to have a serious point even when they're light. So the poem about the vacation and being at the beach, that had a sort of a hint of the problems of the climate and oceans in there. And the poem about being at summer camp, which started out very nostalgic, it had the previously assigned life crises at the end, which unfortunately is what a lot of young people are facing. So these things enter the poems regardless of how I start them.
That's a great line, by the way. The previously assigned life crises.
Sometimes I want to write a poem about a theme or have a theme, and it doesn't work at all. But sometimes it just sits around for a long time and comes out later in a different way. So that's one answer. And then other times I've found, especially more recently, that my sleep, probably my dreams, but I don't even know if it's my dreams, whatever it is, answers a lot of questions. So I'll have something going on and I kind of go, I don't know. And I go to sleep and I wake up with the answer. And that can be an answer to a life crisis too. So, or it can be an answer to like where the poem is leading.
I mean, I would say for me, it's just a little blood. Obviously, has the theme of periods, and it was very intentional when I was writing the book to write about periods from these different lenses and these different ways that having a period affects your life. How does it affect your education? How does it affect your romantic relationships? How does it affect, all these different layers and, the intersection of the period and, these parts of your life. So for the book is very intentional in that way. Versus the poems that I submitted and then were published for the waiting room, they were all the theme for there's the waiting room. Get your copy now. I guess, and it's a lot of what I write about is, and it sounds funny to say just like trauma, but because that can be such a bucket, and especially it seems like a kind of, heavy press word, but I think writers and poets are very interested in that, because it's very relatable, but I don't know what I was saying with that, but definitely for the book, it was the theme, was very intentional. And I was like, I'm going to write a poem about how working in retail intersects with having a period. And it's almost interesting because I could have kept writing the book in some ways, how working from home is so much easier to manage having a heavy period, how the period changes after having an IUD, and just everything. It was very intentional with the book.
Great, thank you. And just I wrote down dreams, and I'm always trying to take notes over here, but dreams and writing what we see, like you said, in your mind, and then you have to see it again. And when I think of dreams, I have dreams sometimes, and maybe some of you do. In the dreams, you go to sleep, you have a dream, and then you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, this is it, I got it. And I have dreams of people who aren't here anymore doing things we've never done. And it's just such a weird way to experience something new with someone that you can't experience anything new with, except you can. And it's mystifying, it's amazing, it's horrible, it's painful, but it just shows kind of the complexity of what goes on in here, and then we're able to take all of that and turn it into something that is tangible, useful, hopefully productive, healthy, and so on. My next question, and it's kind of a personal, it might be a selfish question because it's going to help me in the future instead of everybody else watching. This one is for myself. I had a very important meeting today, and I prepped for it. Prepped for a couple weeks. I was anticipating what I wanted to present, all that kind of stuff that we do, writing it down, reading the notes, freaking out. And so my question for you is, when you're doing a reading, either in person or here, what is your preparation process like? Do you say it 1,000 times on a piece of paper? Do you sit down and have headphones blasting in your ears? Do you ignore the entire world until it's game time? Or do you just say, I know what I'm about, and then get it done?
I'm going to go back one step, though, before we answer this, and just say, not to be redundant, but with the way you were talking about dreams, how about nervous ghost? Yeah.
I would say, to answer Matt's question, it's kind of funny in a professional space, for my 9 to 5, I'm a technical writer. And the whole time I'm like, is this fine for my ideas? And I'm 50% I'm the shit. I know it. I'm certified. Fuck all y'all. I'm doing my thing. And then I ask for forgiveness later for my style guide choices. But then I'm always like, but is it fine? Versus Amanda Kors, the poet, I'm like, no, this is it. This is what I'm reading. This is what I know. I'm the most confident in terms of the many hats I wear. Poet is where I'm like, no, I'm the one here. I mean, not in an arrogant way, but I'm like, yeah, I know what my voice is now that I went to Mills, now that I have done more readings. I know what my voice is more now. I know what my rhythms are. I know kind of my style. I know what I want to write about. I know what I want to touch on, how I want to feel, how I want readers to feel, even though you can't control that. Versus what I picked for reading today. What I wanted to, what I felt most proud of. I didn't want to read everything in the journal, just for something to read for next time I'm here. I'll be here next week, and I'll read that one and then something else from It's Just a Little Blood. But I wanted to feature both and also to showcase what I've done with Nervous Ghost Press. And I might even read something from the anthology that was Writing for Life. That also happened. Pick one of those up. Just pick up everything from Nervous Ghost. Just pick it all up. It's all good. And I will say it's all good because a vote of pure confidence. My father, who's very picky with what he reads, likes everything Nervous Ghost has published. So, I mean, there you have it.
Thank you. I agree. Get everything, and everything is awesome, and everything will always be awesome. So, Amanda, speaking about style and voice, kind of prompted another question, and I always try and think of one or two questions ahead of time to ask and to try and get a conversation going. But then I hope that through the dialogue, more conversations come up. And of course, if any of you have questions, throw them into the universe, get them out there. But the question I have for all of you, and this is what I'm doing. I'm giving a presentation tomorrow about voice and students. It's a whole school day. And I always tell the students, your voice is the most important voice forever. And I kind of go into a little bit about myself and when I found my voice and what that process was like and how awful it was and how scary it was and how amazing it was. And so when I'm listening to all of you read your work, you all have a unique and distinct voice. And so my question is, and of course you can share or not share, but how and when not only did you find your voice, but did you tell yourself, this is it? This is my voice. I have it. And then obviously the rest is history, but that's my question.
I'll jump in. In my case, I can't help but have it. I have a friend who's a very successful writing teacher at New York University. And she once told me, she says, you write very well, but your problem is you don't color within the lines. And I said, I draw my own lines. And after a while, maybe, even at the beginning, you have to realize that, well, all you can do is be the best you are. You can't be someone else. And even when people haven't been so crazy about what I've shown them, they've always commented, oh, I have a voice.
I relate to all
It's a
that.
little toned down. Sometimes I'm pretty raunchy, but it's a voice.
Definitely.
And I think that's the most important thing, because when I read others, I read for the voice. I consider reading being on a road with someone else, and we're having a conversation, or I'm listening to the other person speak. And if they're not interesting, if they don't have a voice, why bother?
I definitely relate to all that. For me, I think voice-wise, I have never had an ounce of chill in my life because my body is a laundry list of mental illness. We have bipolar and 3 different anxiety disorders up in this body, baby. So I have never had an ounce of chill. I, at work, will say, hey, I'm manic, so I don't know how today's going to go. So if I seem wild in meetings, this is the tea. So I've always had really no other choice. Like, you see all of my feelings because they are 100. I'm manic, I'm depressed, I'm falling to the floor with anxiety because I'm dissociating. And that translates into poetry because it has no other outlet, no other option when you have feelings that big, at least for a lot of people with mental illness tend to go into the arts. And I think for me, when I really discovered what my voice is, what my style is, really did happen at Mills. It happened in college when I was doing readings. And Mimi Gonzalez introduced me as a poet. And that was the first time I was identified as a poet. And I was like, oh shit, other people see me as a poet. So that, you know, that kind of means I was validated by being told by other people in the audience saw me as one. To me, I kind of like connected the dots of, okay, that means I have some kind of voice. That means I have some kind of something in this. And so when she named me as such, I was like, well, then that's it. I'm a poet. And so I started to own that identity, and I started carrying myself as like, yeah, I'm, you know, whatever student that and a poet. And I started, you know, submitting my stuff more, and then, you know, all that. But also having a certain amount, a really clinical case of the fuck it's in writing whatever I want and saying, that's it. That's what I'm doing. Like, to write a whole book about periods, I mean, you really do have to have a clinical case of, well, fuck it. They're either going to read it or they're not. Submitting it to Nervous Ghost for the prize, I was like, well, they're either going to live, laugh, love, or they're not going to be gagged by it. And just, yeah, a clinical case. Submit your work, give yourself a clinical case of it, and then see where it goes from there. And that's how I developed part of my voice. It was kind of inevitable, and also part of just being validated by my community.
I'm going to go off in a slightly different direction, though I'm just really liking listening to what all of my colleagues are saying. I don't feel like, it's not that I haven't found my voice, but my voice seems to keep changing, at least some. And part of what's helped me do that is translating things. So I translate things from Italian, and then you have somebody in your ear telling you things, and then you try to bring it out in a different language. And I've also found that the photos and then the words, I go both directions. I actually sometimes have the words and then I find the photo, but mostly it's the photos to the words. And the photos help me to have a voice with that particular photo. So anyway, that's just a part of it. I think I found my voice over the years. Voices.
When you talk about translation, I think about like the different language classes I took in college, and the idea of who do you become when you speak a different language has always intrigued me. How your personality and how you think kind of changes. You become somebody else in a different language in some ways.
I'd like to ask a related question. If you feel that you have your writer's persona and then your public persona. And sometimes I slip from one into the other and I went, uh-oh. It's like I let my underwear show. Does anyone agree or disagree?
No, neither. But because I do readings, that's one thing, but I also perform with a dancer and musicians and lighting artists, and then that persona comes out and it's right in the public's face. I mean, they see it as a performance, but then I don't know how they see me. They may think that's who I am. And guess what? It is who I am. Anyway, so maybe I'm more unhinged than I thought, but I think that I go in and out. I mean, I don't talk poems to people. I'm not some kind of Barty guy or something like that. But I'm just saying, especially with the performing, I feel like it becomes more unified or combined or something.
There's an interesting sort of distinction between what Amanda and MD are saying. You identify as women, right? And what Alan and I are saying. And it seems like for the people identifying as women, it's really important to express yourselves, to be out there, but also to be very conscious of how you appear to other people. And Alan and I, it's not that important. So for me, I started out writing a poem once in a while and imitating other people naturally. And I decided finally, when I decided to get really into poetry, that if English poetry has been around since Chaucer at least, everything's been done already. Why should I try to find a unique voice for myself? So I just do whatever I want. The poems I read tonight might have been on a certain theme, and I also tend to read, when I read poems aloud, I try to choose poems that are easy for people to listen to. But there are other things I do that are quite different, quite wild. So it's a variety of things for me.
Well, I don't think gender has anything to do with it. What I was alluding to is I am not a fiction writer and a poet all the time. For example, I'm an NGO rep to the UN from the Women's National Book Association, and I have to write things up. I have to sometimes go to the UN and act like an adult, shall we say? So, or various things that I do. I'm now the representative for my synagogue to the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. So I have ways of interacting, but then sometimes when I'm in a quasi-social situation with people who aren't writers, who know my other self, I find it kind of, there's like a membrane that can be passed through from one to another. Now, if I were a professional performer, that would be quite natural. And when I traveled a lot, I always thought I was like a spy because I had to have a certain facade to cross borders. I had to present myself as a certain person one way, and then as another person to be with whatever community I was at. And that has always persisted, but it's not how I write my voice. And I was just wondering if anybody else, found it kind of different from going from one role to another.
I feel a little differently. I feel like as I get older, girl, you're not even 30, but you get the idea. As I get older, there's a line in It's Just a Little Blood, who wear the combat boots that could crush the overpotent testes of any Zeus. I feel like I embody that more and more, and even in the workplace, I shut men down, and I'm like, no, I don't agree with that idea. I feel like I get even more assertive, maybe, and I feel like the assertiveness is part of the poetry and part of the poet identity. And I feel like as I wrote It's Just a Little Blood, I gained that confidence and gained that assertiveness. And I feel like now, as I continue doing readings, as I continue streaming on Twitch, I stream on Twitch at Amanda Course, as I just exist, the poet persona gets stronger and then just oozes into everything else, which I fear someday may, in a professional sense, may get me in a little bit of trouble. But that's just kind of how it has been going.
My experience with that is, especially in my role in this chair, or not this chair, but I'm able to speak out and put myself as the face, put myself in the center square, I guess. And then when I'm a guest or I'm a speaker at an open mic or other events, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. What am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to do this? And I can feel a shift in my mentality of depending on the intent and the purpose of that speech or that performance or whatever it is. And I tell my students the same thing, because I couldn't speak for many, many years. And I said, well, create someone who can, and make that person Super Matt. And Super Matt can go out there and talk and yell and scream and wave my hands around and have all the emotions in my face. And then regular Matt will be home like, oh, I hate it. And at some point I realized, hey, wait a minute. It's been me the whole time. and then you just go out there and, like many of you said, it's your voice. You draw your own lines, what's comfortable for you, you say what you want, and then that becomes you. And I think that's what it is. And so I have a final question. I wrote it down. There it is. And unless anybody has a question afterwards, or this will be our last question, but if you think of something, always feel free. I love those. But my question, because we spoke about this before we began, all of us together, about life, about years ago, however many years ago is to be a secret, I suppose. But when life happens, especially in 2023, and I've been very much, I wrote a new poem I'm going to read on Friday, if any of you are in town, which you're not, but I'll read it one of these days too. And it's about mental health, and I've been very much into looking at about the advocacy that exists around mental health, and yet it seems like the issue is going in the wrong direction. And so we have all these advocates, and there's so much advocacy, but what's going on? And so I wanted to write about it, but I didn't want to write about it and just have it be another source of sadness, negativity, and so on. So my question is, when you're writing about life and how normally it's the awful things or what we see out in the world and what's on TV and what's on our news feed and what's in our phones and emails and everything, how do you write about life without just spreading more negativity? How do you write about that stuff that we see every day, what happens in cycles of a certain amount of years, without it just being another form of, oh my gosh, again, I wake up and I see it, now I gotta hear it. So how do you turn it into something beautiful, something magical, something productive?
I think a lot of this is, as a poet and as a writer, you are deciding what is art. By writing a poem, by writing prose, you are deciding what is art. You are deciding what is poetic. And I think in a lot of my work, I have decided that my own rage and that whatever I'm writing about, I decided that periods, you know what, that's poetry. That's art now. I've decided, you can't stop me. I'm writing this book. It's art now. I've decided that eating disorders in Ed, Mia, and Anna, that's art now. I wrote a poem, it's art. Whether it's, the best art in the world, irrelevant. It's a poem now, it's art. Whether that art is beauty, I mean, that's so subjective. And I don't know if my work necessarily is beautiful because it is so raw. A lot of it is kind of angry. So I don't know if I really fulfill that, but I think you just decide what to write about, and in that you have the passion and something happens with that, and that's what makes it poetry. That's what makes it the prose, and that's what makes it the art form. Even if you're not intentionally making it beautiful or having the moral of the story or the hero wins or the whatever of it, you decide that it is art, you are presenting it, it becomes something else when you write it. If that makes any sense at all.
I have written some very negative poems. I did it out of my own anxiety, my own depression. They're about, climate stuff and one poem I kind of apologized to the next generation because I'm in my 60s. I apologize to them for not giving them the world that we should have. But it's interesting that those poems haven't gotten published. So maybe they really are for me, because maybe the editors realize that they're too negative. I'm glad that I did them, though.
I've gotten feedback. I read some poems before It's Just a Little Blood was published. I read for a women's history event. I read some of the poems, and then one of the professors was like, that was a little negative. I was like, have you been a woman? Like, it's kind of a negative experience sometimes. And it was a woman. I was like, girl. I had to laugh. I thought that was funny. I was like, well, I am kind of a negative person. That's part of me.
And your writing workshop should be a safe place to do that, I think.
All right, any other questions or comments or realizations or just cool things to say? Anybody got any cool things to say? Just
Well, I'm from New York. I was brought up that there are no safe places. So that's my attitude, and that you have to navigate. You have to survive. And well, if you read the end of my story, you'll know that it's about death
Yeah.
and life. In
I
that
tell my students that we create a secure space because we're going to have conversations that are not safe. And just like we're in here, we're going to have conversations that are not safe, they're painful, they hurt, they're emotionally dangerous. And yet we are secure in that all of us are here together for a shared purpose, a purpose of growth and community and so on. And so I agree.
And the most important thing is to honor everybody's perception. You have the right to say what you see.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I used to give trigger warnings before reading my poems. And then I was like, well, if you go to a reading, you kind of expect trauma because poets and writers, we're into that. We're very into that and we'll write about it a lot. So I was like, well, if you're going there, you kind of sign up for that. And we all agree that it's a safe place to share that. And it's kind of up to you to regulate that kind of stuff. Now, when I share it online, I'll put the trigger warnings, but I feel like it's almost like apologetic in some ways for readings to be like, oh, I'm going to talk about, and so I kind of go back and forth on how I feel about trigger warnings. Because I feel like for movies, sometimes like that's more appropriate, but then somehow for books and other things, I don't feel that way. Is it enough to say this is rated, whatever, it's for this age audience versus being like, I'm going to talk about eating disorders and I'm sorry, sometimes it feels like the specific trigger warnings can feel apologetic versus being like, this is a reading. It's intended for a mature audience. It's up to you to regulate how you feel about things without being like, fuck your feelings, So it's kind of a fine line for me because I am a very like heavy subject writer. I do talk a lot about the very heavy things, and it's a fine line. We weren't talking about this, but I thought I'd bring it up. The role of trigger warnings and ratings, because I remember when we were talking about who do we say this audience is for It's Just a Little Blood, we were kind of like, well, it's for who's ever brave enough to read it, honestly.
I have two things to say about trigger warnings that I think actually fit into the answer to your question, Matthew, maybe. When somebody asks for trigger warnings, I almost always say there's a trigger warning for submissions because somebody gets upset by something. What do I know? And that leads me to my second thing. I can think of a number of things that I've written that still make me uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Now, if I put a trigger warning to that, I often find or have found that other people are going, whatever. It's like it didn't bother them. And so I don't know what to say about trigger warnings. But I'm going to keep putting them in there because I don't know what they're asking. I know what they're asking, but I don't know what the answer is. How about that?
It almost then with trigger warnings and poetry becomes just a list of what you've written about thematically and subject wise, I found that with fan fiction too. It's just a list of the kinks. It's not really trigger warnings.
I did use a trigger warning at least once, but I'm always thinking we worry about people who have to hear about this stuff, but there's millions of people who have to live this stuff. They don't get a trigger warning before it happens to them.
I was just going to say something similar that I had a conversation with someone and they said the exact same thing. I didn't get a trigger warning when I lived it, and that's not fair. And so where's the line? And again, the intent and the purpose comes into play. Is, are you writing it for somebody else? Are you writing it for yourself? Are you writing it for a performance or for closure or for healing, and so on? But thank you again for the conversation, and I really think that I benefit the most from these discussions because they're so cool. I get to practice speaking and listening and shutting up every once in a while, and to let you all have the floor. But thank you for being here. Thank you for joining another virtual event. Our next virtual event, everybody, is August 31st, 6 o'clock PST, and there will be one more for the event that we postponed. So I haven't decided when yet. Sometime in September. It depends on the class schedule. Everybody's going back to school. Everybody's kind of getting back into the swing of things, but it will happen at some point. And I'll of course email all the writers. If you're in town in Pico Rivera down here by LA, a couple miles east, we're having our monthly open mic in person. I'm going to be reading a new poem. So if you're not in town, get into town, fly here, take the train, do something. It'll be really fun. I haven't read a new poem in many, many months, but I'm excited about it. And so we'll see you all.
Would you email us the poem if we can't be there?
Ooh,
I'm on
maybe.
another coast. Yeah,
I'll
I'd
have
love
to-
to read it.
I'll fix it up before I send it out.
You mean you'll fix it up? We
I'm not
just
sure
talked
yet.
about, expressing oneself.
Yeah, I could send it out. That's a pretty good.
I mean, after you do the reading, because sometimes when you read something, you
Oh, yes.
hear, those words should be reversed, or there's a different rhythm to it or something.
And that's a great point about getting out there and reading, because it makes our writing so much better, because we get to hear what it sounds like when it's spoken and given life. So tune in August 31st, everybody. Again, get a copy of the journal. You'll read everybody's work. You'll finish reading everybody's work. I hope that you are intrigued and inspired. Please connect with us. I don't really know how to do the subscribe and say all that kind of stuff that everybody else does, but here's our socials on your screen. Email me anytime. I always answer. And if I don't answer, email me again and remind me, because sometimes they get lost.
And can I give a little plug for another publication, Caesura?
Yeah,
Are you familiar with Caesura?
I think I heard the name,
It's
but I'm not.
Yeah,
so
California.
familiar.
I'm going to have a poem in the fall issue.
Awesome. That's really cool.
And the
That's a-
fall
yeah.
print issue, they do both online and print, and they're separate.
Fantastic. On yeah, send me the info. Maybe I could email it out too. I'll try.
Okay.
And maybe my
And it has to do with the subject we were talking about, having different personas.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you for letting us know. And if anybody else ever has anything, always feel free to share it. This isn't just a Nervous Ghost Press Day. This is a you day, and that's what I want everyone to know. And so again, thank you for our readers. Thank you for everybody tuning in next time, and tuning in when you're listening on the way to work, but while you're driving and focusing on the road, or when you're at work and you're not paying attention to work, but you're watching our videos instead, because it might be a little bit more fun. But we will see you all on the 31st. And everybody in our Zoom, remember, I'm going to keep us alive for a little bit afterward, so don't go yet. But thank you to the viewers, and we